In this episode, we are going to dive deeper into one of the 6 belief buckets, religious survivors. If you listen to the belief bucket overview episode, then you will know that you fit into the religious survivor bucket. But if you haven't, that's all good. I'm going to explain what that bucket is and what those people feel and just all the more detail about them so that you can know if you fit in that bucket. And I'm also going to give you some steps that you can take to support yourself. If you are a religious survivor, you most likely have a chip on your shoulder. You have felt hurt, wronged, or betrayed by either a religion or a belief system, or somebody who represents that belief system, or somebody that is in that belief system. You don't even necessarily have to have been or be a part of any religion or belief system, but you could have just been hurt by somebody who is in that belief system. I have multiple examples of clients and even of personal friends that have had this experience. I am personally one of them that I have been in the bucket of a religious survivor before. I will tell you, it's not a very pleasant place to be. It is my passion to help people that feel like they're in this bucket, that really resonate with the feeling of having religious trauma and having a bad taste in their mouth. A lot of things that I hear religious survivors say is that I'm angry with God, I hate religion, I never want anything to do with it, I don't understand how somebody who's supposed to believe in something so kind and good could be so bad. Religious survivors have a hard time separating the person who maybe hurt them from the belief system. And in the bucket of a religious survivor, it's the belief system that we have a vendetta against, because it's that belief system that has hurt us. It has what has hurt us, wronged us, or betrayed us. We feel, or those in this bucket feel betrayed by God. They feel like it was used against them. Maybe perhaps in their childhood, they were supposed to go to church or catechism or whatever it was. And if they didn't, then they got punished, or they got something taken away, or they wouldn't have something good unless they did these things, even if they didn't want to. There's a lot of association to force and power over you, and not this feeling of lightness and of choice and freedom. Religious survivors, again, have religious trauma in one way, shape, or another. They really crave reconciliation, not with their beliefs per se, but with their literal higher power. Again, because they feel wronged and hurt and betrayed, it can show up in many different ways. It can show up by the person representing it. It can show up by truly just the belief system itself. It can show up by the higher power in that belief system. And because they have these really hard feelings that they're dealing with, they're craving this reconciliation in order to come into this state of what the Hawaiians call pono. Pono is like balanced, coming into or making peace and having balance. A lot of religious survivors can also be susceptible to projecting either their hurt or pain from their human parents onto their higher power, whether they believe that it's a father God or mother spirit or whatever their higher power is. We often have an association to our higher power kind of being like a parent, at least in the Christian doctrine. If you guys are familiar with that, or if you're in that, you obviously know that they refer to God as being the Father. And there's this really high susceptibility for religious survivors to project either hurt or pain that they've had from the belief system or from the religion onto their human parents, or vice versa, that they have a lot of hurt, pain, and trauma from their human parents, and they project that onto their higher power. In both instances, it leaves somebody who's a religious survivor feeling very disconnected, very unloved, very lost and alone, and one of those what I would call a lost and lonely soul. it's really, really tragic and really sad because, in my opinion, in my world, we all have a piece of source within us. We all have a piece of God. We are genuinely made in the image of the divine creator. We are all kind of like little miniature creators ourselves. And when we have a disconnect, or when we are so against that part of ourselves, there's no cohesion, there's no coherence, there's no congruency. And if you watched any of my other podcasts before where I talk about fragments and the fact that like evil can live in our voids, this is a really big way that we have a void in ourselves. If we have separation from our higher power, and we have separation from the light that is within ourselves, due to not having that feeling of safety and of unconditional love, nurturance, support, and validation from our higher power, then those fragments begin to separate, and more of that space that exists in our fragments is more room for evil and unrest and negative emotion to live inside of us. So this is not just impactful because if you're on a spiritual path and you are maybe struggling or feeling lost and alone, this is impactful because it is literally affecting every area of your life. If you are not connected to that light within yourself, and ultimately that light which is connected to the higher power source of all that is, then you're going to be a lot less powerful. You're going to be a lot less full of love, a lot less loving, a lot less able to forgive and to really feel connected to you, yourself, everyone around you, and everything in your life. It's a really big separation. And the reason why I can speak about that and talk about that is because I was that once. I am a religious survivor. I've kind of moved through the steps I needed to move through in order to heal from my experience of my religious trauma. But while I was in it, it was very hard. It was scary. It was very lonely. I would feel depressed at times. I would feel abandoned. And granted, even though I had experiences of that as a child from human parents, I was doing that thing where I was projecting the father energy of my human father onto Father God and vice versa. So I had trauma in like different areas, and it was all also affecting and impacting the spiritual trauma. If you listen to that belief bucket overview episode, I go through other buckets that a lot of people are aware of, like a believer. And oftentimes a believer doesn't have that same experience where they feel lost and alone and disconnected and abandoned because they have a belief system that they are very congruent with. When you're a religious survivor, you've lost that. It's almost like if you were tethered to a pole at one time, it's like that rope got cut and now you're just floating in the abyss all alone by yourself with no real support, no real connection to like an authentic and genuine love and unconditional love rather. And it's very lonely. Okay. Some examples of religious survivors. There's many. I am one of them. I grew up Catholic, and I am also a medium and a psychic, and I could see, feel, and hear energies, people who had crossed over, emotions. I could see these things. I had experiences. I was attacked by these things at certain points in my childhood, and I was gaslit all the time. Nobody believed me. People said that I was crazy, that I was the devil, that I would go to hell if I would read about spiritual mediums or near-death experiences or past lives or psychics or anything of the sort. People that were in the religion would tell me this. The religion itself didn't tell me this. So I was one of those examples of people who were hurt by people inside the religion, even though I was also inside of it. And the Catholic religion itself, I have nothing against it anymore. But the Catholic religion was, at the time, for me and my personal experience, was very rigid and very judgmental, very harsh, and just had this tiny, tiny little box that you could fit in And anything outside of that was totally unacceptable. Like you couldn't even question it. And if you did, you were punished or made wrong or scared into being damned to hell and being unaccepted by God and rejected by God. And gosh, I tell you what, that is such a hard reality to experience when like the beingness of who I was and am was so condemned. I'm like, this can't make any sense. How is this possible that what I'm being told, that an all benevolent, all loving God could reject me and could not love me and could damn me to hell because I was just the way that I was. It didn't make sense. It didn't line up for me. And I would go to mass as a kid, kicking and screaming, and I would feel so unsafe. I would feel like there was this energy around me. It's like, it's hard to explain, but that I was just wrong for being who I was. And as a kid, like, how sad is that? That is not what, in my opinion, a supportive, all-loving, all-benevolent, unconditionally loving being or belief system should make somebody feel. And if any of you religious survivors have ever felt that way, I know what it's like, and it is not a good feeling. And so I continued on with, hating God. I had such a hatred for God and for religion, and I found more solace in ideologies like the New Age and reading about psychics and mediums because I could actually relate to them. I'm like, oh my God, there's other people that have this or that feel this way or see these things. And it was so invigorating for me. I was like, finally, I feel like I've, finally felt heard and seen and validated because I was gaslit for so long. And this was at a young age. Like I started reading these books when I was 12, maybe even earlier, like 11. I was introduced to the book Conversations with God at a young age. And I really went down this path. Anyway, I'm getting off topic and digressing. But as a young one, this experience of the religious trauma was very, very, very difficult for me and made me a very angry, sad, scared, alone person, young person. I eventually went on my path and I discovered like non-denominational Christianity, and I had some really beautiful healing experiences, but I'll get into that in a minute when I go through some of the steps that you can take if you are a religious survivor to support yourself. But I want to go through another example. One of my close friends was a Jehovah's Witness, and she was in that religion for her whole life, and she ended up being, I forget the words that she used, but she was basically kicked out of the church, and they had this whole ceremony to like shame her. I don't think she went to it, but they literally had all of their people get together to like shame her and kick her out of the church, like officially. And in that doctrine, people who are believing in things outside of it, like that's super unacceptable. It's pretty dogmatic and can be very strict. If any of you are Jehovah's Witnesses, all the power to you. You have every right to choose what is the very best and highest for you. But if you are an ex-Jehovah's Witness, I feel for you. And I know that experience from a personal friend who has also had that experience. And the trauma that one has from that experience is really, really real. And the things that I am going to help share with you with the steps to take, I hope will really help you. Religious survivors need different things than the other buckets because they have this hurt, wronged, betrayed experience. They need a lot of healing and forgiveness. And I'm going to go into that in a little bit. It's hard to think about that or to accept that or to even know what that means, because when we're talking about a religious trauma or a spiritual trauma, the other party that you feel wronged by is not like, maybe it is a person, but it's a little bit more etheric than that. If you're trying to reconcile with God, boy, that's a big task. And how do you even wrap your head around that? What does that even mean? I'm going to help explain that in a minute. Religious survivors also need a safe space to re-experience and re-explore their beliefs. A lot of times their experience of their beliefs has been obliterated because they throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like, you have hurt and you have betrayal and feeling wronged. Everything that is associated to whoever or whatever caused that for you, you're going to throw it right out the door. So even if there is something good or something valuable in that belief system or in that religion or whatever it was, you're going to throw it out. You're going to completely disregard it. Like me, I was so angry with God. I hated Jesus. I couldn't even say the word God. I didn't want anybody to say it to me. I couldn't say it. I wanted to call it universe and source and all these other different words that I could have a better and more positive association to. That's a very common thing that religious survivors need. They need like a reintroduction to God and a deprogramming of what they were programmed with or what they were hurt by. So we need to separate out fact from fiction and person from belief system, right? Like, if a person is who hurt you, we need to separate out that it was that person and that person's perception of the belief system that hurt you, not the belief system itself. So getting really clear on like what actually really hurt you and how can we reconcile with it. These folks also really crave and need a deeper connection to themselves and their higher power that truly resonates in and with their core. Not just like, oh yeah, like I kind of believe this and it's fine, like it's whatever. No, it's like these people I find really need that healing and that corresponding true, authentic belief that there is a higher power that can resonate with their core and feel congruent with themselves and be something that doesn't hurt them, right? It's with any trauma that we have to go through this process. So let's get into the steps to take if you're a religious survivor. First step, you need to acknowledge that this is the bucket that you fit into. If you don't, that's okay, but acknowledgement is the first step towards anything. You have to make admittance. Like I said earlier, a lot of times religious survivors throw the baby out with the bathwater and they just take everything as a negative that they associate to it. I'm going to give you a real life example or a more specific example for us to talk through here. This is just one example because this is the example that I've gone through. But let's just start with Catholicism. Because I was raised Catholic, as I mentioned, I thought that confessing was evil. I thought it was like weird that I had to go tell some random stranger priest guy all the things that I've done wrong and that I need to ask him to forgive me and I need to repent and say I'm sorry and that I'll never do it again and that he has to forgive me and I have to receive the forgiveness. That whole process to me made no sense at the time. And I threw it out with the rest of all the stuff that I was so hurt and upset by. Come to find out later on in my life, I realized, wow, that process is actually the same process that we have to go through when we are healing something with somebody, when we're going through conflict resolution. We have to admit that we made a mistake. Like, hey, I'm so sorry that I said something hurtful to you. That was not the right thing to do. You admit, you confess, like, hey, I made a mistake here. I'm a fallible being, I'm not perfect, and I make mistakes, period. Then you have to ask for forgiveness and say, I admit that I made this mistake. Will you forgive me? And repent. You say, like, I'm sorry, this won't happen again. I will be better next time. I won't call you names and I won't say something that's mean and hurtful to you. I will be more careful about my words so that you make a commitment to being better next time. That is a really profoundly helpful framework to go through resolving any conflict. And that's kind of sort of the framework that the Catholic religion uses to help people overcome their sins. So that's an example of how I threw the baby out with the bathwater. But now I'm looking back at it and being like, yeah, that's actually very helpful because I've been able to do these steps to heal my religious survivor bucket. Okay, so that first step is acknowledgement. You recognize and acknowledge, I fit into this religious survivor bucket. I have had religious trauma. I admit that these things have hurt me so much to the point where, I feel these ways about God, or I'm so disconnected from myself, The second step is a willingness and a desire to heal. If you don't care that this has happened to you, or you don't really notice the negative impacts of it, that's fine. Then you don't have to do anything. If it's not hurting you still to this day, it's not impacting you negatively, then there's nothing that you really need to do. The second step of willingness and a desire to heal is really because if you don't have that, then the rest of the steps are moot. There's no purpose for them. So you need to have a willingness and desire to heal. Then the third step is really a suggestion on my behalf, because of what I've experienced helping people work through their religious trauma and being a religious survivor, is processing the experiences. To recount, as a storyteller, and tell someone that's trusted, whether it's a therapist or a friend or family member that you trust, and recount the experiences and really allow yourself not necessarily to relive the trauma, but to bring them to light. If they're stuck in dark shadows of being stuck in different parts of yourself, we really need to shine a light on them and bring them forward. That's the only way to heal. We have to bring them out into the light. So processing them out loud, or if you don't want to do it with anybody else, you can journal it. You can, do a voice memo talking about it out loud, but some way, shape, or form where you're bringing it up and expressing it and doing that form of release work. Then the next step, once you're ready for it, is forgiveness, which is ironic because in the Catholic and Christian doctrine, but actually even more so in Catholicism and Orthodoxy, forgiveness is a really big part of that doctrine. And it's interesting because throughout my journey, again, because I threw the baby out with the bathwater, I never really considered that being important until I went through training with one of my teachers who I learned the ancient Hawaiian tradition from. And forgiveness is one of the most pinnacle parts of their doctrines that they have. Because in order to right wrongs, you have to forgive. It's this energy of letting go and moving forward, not by shoving it under the rug, but by genuinely having a healing experience of forgiving. I have multiple podcasts about, Jesus and forgiveness and sins and all of that. But just in a general sense here today, the power of forgiveness is monumental. It's profound. When I do forgiveness healing work with clients, that is one of the most potent part of our healing work. If they have trauma from childhood with their parents, their siblings, with other peers, we do forgiveness work. And their problems significantly improve. Their grudges go away. Their hurt and their pain is soothed. And their wounds turn into distant scars. Religious survivors need forgiveness. They need forgiveness of the people who represented the belief system that wronged them, hurt them, betrayed them. They need forgiveness of themselves for being so separated for so long, because with religious survivors, right, like I mentioned earlier, there's a huge gap in the connection of yourself because you don't have a fully healed, together, whole experience of yourself, your own light, and your connection to source, higher power, God, whatever you want to call it. So you need forgiveness of yourself for, being separated for so long. And then, depending on where you fall in the bucket of religious survivor, you need forgiveness of that higher power. Whatever you thought that it did to you, or when it didn't show up for you, or when it wasn't there for you, or how you felt betrayed, or whatever it was, you need forgiveness of that higher power. I know that you might have an association, because I did, of thinking that it needs to be a certain way, and as humans we project the expectations that we have onto the higher power as like, well, you should have done this, and why weren't you there here, and why was I alone during this, and da 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 da, like the list goes on. But we forget that it's not us that gets to have an expectation of higher power. It's us who gets to take the steps to have a relationship with higher power, with that version or part of ourself that's inside of us, the light that is inside of us. It is our duty and responsibility to be connected to that light that's in us and that's around us, right? So forgiving of that higher power or that entity or that thought or idea is super, super important. Okay, and then once you go through this forgiveness and understanding process, personally in my journey, what really helped me was I didn't go out and do this. It actually all came to me based off of experiences I had in my life. And eventually I did step number 5, really unknowingly at the time, where I had positive experiences of that belief system. Now, granted, it wasn't specifically Catholicism that I had positive belief experience or positive experiences with. It was just Christianity in general. I had a lot of healing experiences with like non-denominational Christian churches and pastors that really helped me feel more connected to that belief system. And I have multiple stories that will be scattered throughout podcast episodes of when I had like these profound spiritual healing experiences of, Jesus coming into my heart and healing all the cracks, and hearing specific songs and just collapsing and bawling my eyes out, finally feeling like I wasn't alone and that I was supported and I was loved, and that I didn't have to have so much anger in my heart anymore and so much hurt. And those healing experiences were like profound. And if that's not happening for you like it did for me, just out of the blue, then I suggest that you just allow yourself to open up to the possibility of it. Because for me, I know that my path and my journey on this planet is to help the lost and lonely souls find home and the light and power within themselves. And so these experiences, I do believe, like came to me divinely because I needed to go through this process of healing. But if you're a person who wants that and craves that, then I suggest that you just open yourself up to the possibility, like going through these steps of acknowledging and being willing and desiring to heal and processing your experiences and then forgiving and understanding. Eventually, I do believe that you'll be magnetized to more positive experiences of that belief system, whatever it was that maybe you felt wronged or hurt by. Okay, and then the final step here to support you is to reframe your own beliefs. There are a lot of people that will probably disagree with me about this, and that's okay. But as a religious survivor, I know, again, because it's really hits home for me, I have never been okay with somebody forcing different beliefs onto me or a certain doctrine that I couldn't have my head wrap around and like feel fully congruent with and in alignment with. I've needed to explore like the truth that is inside of me and what I believe to be true about myself and higher power and even Jesus and the whole story in the Bible and all of that and like how everything works together. Religious survivors, we have kind of like anybody who has trauma, there's a little bit of distrust that can still linger. And I do suggest that we continue working on that and like building trust with ourselves and with others and with God and beliefs and whatnot. But there can be a little twinge of like not trusting things. So when I say reframing your own beliefs, I mean like getting really connected to your core, more connected to home inside yourself once you've gone through this process of healing, and really tapping into what's true for you. I did this process over 2 to 2.5 years where I read through the Bible every single morning. Every morning I woke up for at least an hour, sometimes 2 hours, and I would read the Bible and I would like feel intuitively into what it was saying. And I would start journaling and writing about like this is profound and amazing and so healing. Like, let me write about it and take note of it. Or this passage feels like it was manipulated and like just distorted, and somebody changed the meaning of it in order for it to be more controlling, or like I could just feel the words on the pages or how it was translated perhaps in my version, and that it wasn't true for me. So I didn't give myself the requirement to have to reconcile with the religion, so much so to the point where I just blindly followed and believed everything. I still allowed myself permission to ask questions and to be curious and to really feel into what was actually really true and authentic to me. And that journey still continues today. I'm still doing that process, and I am going to be doing that process even throughout the entire life of this podcast, because that's just what is here and present in my life, and that might be what's here and present for you. Maybe this process won't be as intense and as long for you, but I do suggest that the reframing of your own beliefs is a step that you take seriously and that you put energy into, because when you are a believer in whatever the system it is that you believe in, it makes you that much more powerful. It makes you more connected to who you are, to yourself. It makes you more in alignment with your own nature, and it allows your gifts to be expressed. It allows you to be more vibrant and full and fulfilled. And that's really what our goal is here, for you to shift and move out of being a lost and lonely soul and to really find the power and light within yourself. And that's really what's going to help support you to do that. So I will leave this here with you today. We've really gone deep into what being a religious survivor is like, what you may have experienced, some examples from my personal life and other people that I know. I hope that you feel seen and validated, recognized, heard, supported, that you are not alone, that you do not have to remain in this lost and lonely state forever, that it is possible for you to heal and to, transition out of this bucket, perhaps into any other bucket, whether you fully heal from this and you choose to be a non-believer, that's cool, or you heal from this and you choose to be a believer, also cool, or if you go down the path of atheism, cool. I just want you to feel connected to that which is within yourself. And, atheism isn't really technically connected to a whole lot. So I would maybe kind of hope that you go in the direction of being a believer, because when you believe in yourself, that in and of itself is a belief in higher power, because you are a spark of the divine system, of the creator of who you were, or the creator of who you are. So I am hoping, wishing, and praying that this has been really helpful and supportive to you today, that you follow these steps in order to help you heal and progress along your path. And I will be excited for you to tune into the next episode. If you love this episode and or maybe others that you've listened to, please leave a review wherever you're listening to this. Share it with somebody that you think it could help. That's the biggest way you can help me help even more people like us. And if you want one-on-one support, feel free to go to findinghomehealing.com and schedule an intro session with me there. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and we'll see you in the next one.